So today we're going to talk about Contract Companion and Litigation Companion, and together they're called Litera Check. You'll see here up at the top, we've got one group. I've got some other groups hidden here, so we're only going to focus on this today. But before we get started, I just wanted to ask those that are here, does anybody currently have Contract Companion or Litigation Companion installed?
No.
Okay, great. This will be fresh. All right, so this training is going to be around, like a train the trainer session. But, by and large, there's not a lot of difference between a user training and the trainer training. And I'll go over that and why that is. But first off, let me just introduce myself. My name is Brett Bassick. I'm a solutions engineer here at Litera. I've been working here for about 7 years. I came from the legacy microsystems side. So I have a lot of experience with Contract Companion, Litigation Companion, Litera Check, and even the previous software before it, which was known as Eagle Eye. So before I get into any of the actual demonstration itself, I want to talk about the functionality that we have available here in this small group. Now you'll see here, we've only got 4 buttons. It's relatively simple, but 2 of these are drop downs, and I'm going to go over the functionality of them before we get into the actual workflows that you'll see. Contract Companion is, for the most part, a proofreading software. Litigation Companion is in the same vein, but instead of focusing on the overall document proofreading, we'll be focusing on citations and authorities. At this point in time, Litigation Companion does not have a table of authorities feature, but we do have best authority, which will be bundled in with it in the future. So as it stands now, the best authority piece is a separate installation and separate workflow. But I can show you how you can use Litigation Companion to your advantage, just to make sure that the citations and anything else regarding to citations are on the straight and narrow, okay? So first and foremost, I want to talk about this Analyze button. This Analyze button looks from a very high level at the entire document and will open up a task pane with a categorical view, allowing you to choose each category and drill down into that particular area of the document. Now you'll notice also that this Analyze button is a drop down. So when I click on the drop down, we can see that we have some more specifics with regards to the analyzation. The first one here is Define Term Checker, which is also a drop down, and it allows you to scan the entire document for defined terms or selected text only. Now, if you have a 500-page document and you have a definition section, it would behoove you to run it on the entire document because you know that your definition section is maybe only the first few pages. In that scenario, you'd want to select that text and do selected text only. It will simply speed up the analyzation process. Now, when we're clicking on Define Term Checker or Cross-Reference Checker or Final Checks, I just want you to realize that it is still performing the same exact function as the full-on Analyze button. Again, we're only focusing on these areas. So upon clicking the Define Term Checker, we would pull up a task pane that would include my definitions themselves and any defined term issues that Litera Check has found. The cross-reference checker will give me all of my references along with any numbering issues found, since you need to have a numbering scheme in place and you need to have your numbered items set up accordingly so that your cross-references actually do work. And then finally, Final Checks will show incomplete items and potential editing mistakes. Now, these aren't generally going to be the risk areas, although they could be. A lot of times, Final Checks is where you'll see things like punctuation or spacing, things like that aren't correct or aren't consistent throughout the document. Next, we have the Show Active Drafting button, and this is a toggle. This doesn't actually make any changes to the document itself, but if I click on this, you'll notice as I scroll through that it's going to analyze and it's going to superimpose some underlines in different colors on different terms throughout the document. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see a little bit more. So here you can see we've got some red underlines, some purple underlines, some blue underlines, etc. And we'll go over the meaning of all this, but by and large, what this is simply a visual aid. So while you are proofing the document, so you can see where these issues are within the document. These aren't actually underlines that are saved into the document. So if you were to print this, these would not show up. The next two buttons in the check group here are actually the litigation companion functionality. Now, while you're running the Analyze button will show the citations within the task pane, so you can still utilize that button and that workflow to review the citations. But if you come across something within the document that is not being picked up, such as citations that's not being picked up, you can utilize the dropdown here and mark the citation. This will leverage native words citation dialog, and you can mark it thusly. I will go over the actual workflow of it. I just wanted to talk about the buttons before we get into the workflows. In addition to marking the citation, you can also mark a citation as incomplete via bullets, highlighted text, colored text, bracketed text, or curly bracketed text. Also, just a thing to note, if there is a bulleted item, a highlighted item, or any of these other items that we see here, Contract Companion will actually recognize that in the analyzation pane as a potential item that needs to be addressed one way or another. And last but not least, we have the Highlight Authorities toggle. Just like Show Active Drafting, this button is a toggle, and you can only use one of these at a time. Notice how Show Active Drafting grays out while Highlight Authorities is active. And to be honest, I don't think that this document has any authorities in it. I do have a document that will highlight this. But again, just like showing active drafting, it is a visual aid just so you can very quickly see the authorities highlighted within the document itself. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click the Analyze top half of the button here so we can take a look at the categorical view. I will drill down into some of the focused analyzation functionality as well, just to show you how that works. Okay, so before I go into any of these categories, I want to talk about some of the icons that we're seeing and what they mean. Okay, so here we have a flag, we have an attention item with a red exclamation point, and we have a filter icon. And it's telling me actually that there's 0 filtered risk. Now, when we talk about filtered risks, a risk with regard to Contract Companion is an item that will be flagged as a red exclamation point. These are the big hitters, the things that you'll likely want to address first and foremost. Any sort of risk item could potentially compromise the integrity of the document. In addition to that, we also see some flags. And a flag is an item that's actually been placed here by another Contract Companion user. So if you ever see a flag, just know this was not placed here by the program. This was not an automatic placement. This was another user that was proofing the document, came across an item, and said, you know what? This item needs somebody else's attention. I will flag this item and send the document to them so that they can address this particular item. One thing to note, flags are entered into the document and saved into the document via a hidden bookmark. So when it comes to hidden bookmarks, metadata scrubbers will often clean these out. This is just something to be aware of. If you're sending internally and you're collaborating with an attorney or somebody else within the firm, generally hidden bookmarks will be safe from internal emails. But there are some firms that are a little more secure than others, and they have things like this locked down. It's just something to note that your flags might not get through in that situation. There are other avenues to bringing an item to somebody else's attention, and I will show you how to do those as well. One other icon that is actually not visible in this particular pane right now is an informational icon. That is indicated by a yellow exclamation point icon. And those are things like, spacing, punctuation, nothing that's going to get the document thrown out, but it's reputational. And, if you're drafting up a document and proofing a document, you want it to be as bulletproof as possible. We routinely receive these, and I quote, bulletproof documents from other firms that have been proofed manually, and we'll run it through Contract Companion, and we will just about every time find some sort of issue. So we've gone over the icons, and I want to dig into these categories, but first let me talk about this risk assessment box up at the top. It's big. It's got a little graph here to show, the severity of this particular document and what this stuff means. So this little bar graph here will give you an indicator, and it will also change color between red, yellow, and green based on severity of the risk found in this particular document. This one isn't in terrible shape, but there are some risks here. If you see it in the red, you'll likely spend more time in the risk assessment area. And that said, the risk assessment area is actually clickable. So if you were proofing this document and you said, well, I want to address all of my risks before I drill down into the mundane simply checking of the content of the document, I can simply click on the risk assessment area here, and it will open up all of my risks in order, including my flagged items because they were in fact flagged by another user. And the risk assessment area will give me all of my red exclamation points and flags, regardless of what category they're in. So you'll find categories from just about any of those tiles that we saw in that first page. So this is a great place to start when proofing your documents. Mainly because you're going to address all of the risks first, and after that you can rest assured that nothing is going to get this document thrown out, but there's certainly more work to be done when it comes to proofing. Now let me talk about one difference in these items here. You'll notice that all these items here are in white, and then we've got this one item down at the bottom that is gray. What this means is that somebody in their proofing of this document, we know somebody's already touched this document because of the flags. Somebody has been going through this document and they've marked this item as reviewed already. Any reviewed item will not remove itself from the task pane. It will simply gray itself out. Reviewed items are also indicated within the document and saved in the document as a hidden bookmark. The only time that Contract Companion, Litigation Companion, or check, however you want to say it, modifies the document as far as metadata, it's via hidden bookmark. So let's go through this and address some of these items and how you would see this in an everyday workflow. First off, before I get to my risks, let's talk about this one item here that's not actually a risk, and it's simply flagged. So I know that somebody else had placed this here, and they placed it on Illinois. Now, Illinois would be flagged by Contract Companion by default without getting a flag. It would not flagged, but it would get brought up in the task pane. And it's simply telling me there's no problem, but just to review this location for accuracy. Now, as my test document that I use on a day-to-day basis, I know this document intimately, but if I scrolled through the document and did some diligence here, I would see that this was actually a Wisconsin company. So in this scenario, the proofreader saw that it was listed as an Illinois company, but something told them that it should have been Wisconsin. So in this case, I'm going to simply navigate to that place within the document and spell out Wisconsin. Now, I know that some of you may notice this, but you'll see that limited liability has a lowercase l and an uppercase L for liability, and it doesn't say company or corporation after the fact. This isn't something that Contract Companion would be looking for. Although, if there was a situation where you would want it to be looking for this, you can go into the settings and modify a term to be picked up. I'll show you how to do this later. Okay, so as I changed this from Wisconsin to Illinois, and I come back over to my my task pane, you can see that Illinois has disappeared. And you say, wait, back this up, Brett. You said that the task pane will never remove an item, and that's absolutely true. It won't. However, this was an item that was flagged, and I completely removed that item from the document and replaced it with a completely different state. So that item technically does not even exist anymore. But if I were to go to places, like if I go back and I look up all results, I will now find Wisconsin in my list as opposed to Illinois, and it's going to simply tell me to review it for accuracy. And I'm not going to go searching for it now. There's a lot of terms in here, but I'm sure we'll stumble across. Oh, I just saw it. I'm sure we'll stumble across it as we go through. So here we can see Wisconsin, review this location for accuracy. There is no indicator of any sort of problem within this document. So coming back to the main task pane, there's a couple choices that you have here. How do you want to go about proofing the document? All right. And the beautiful thing about this product is there's no right or wrong way. You can go about proofing this document in a way that suits you best. If you want to come to the risk assessment area and address all the risks first, regardless of category, great. If you'd like to go via categorical view, because that's the way your brain works, and you want to say, I want to do my definitions and defined term issues first, I can simply come here to my defined term issues and go down the list. Maybe you'd prefer to have the sledgehammer approach where you just say, give me everything in the document and just go to all results. And then from the top down, you can view every result that we find within the document. So you'll see here, we've got the red exclamation points, risks sorted first. My yellow exclamation points, these are my informational items, something not necessarily putting the document in jeopardy, but you still want to address it. And then every other potential term that could be a risk in the document is listed here purely for proofing, just to make sure that everything is correct and ready for the client. So if I look here within my all results, we'll just go down the line and see what we've got. So this is telling me that I've got two instances of the term agreement, and the term is not defined within this document. Now, this is a bit of an ambiguous term. This is saying this agreement, and if I navigate to the next one, it's talking about an agreement, okay? The first term is actually an inline definition, so this is kind of moot. It's saying this master debt restructuring agreement or this agreement, okay? So that defines it as this particular agreement. But because the other agreement is not really used in the same manner, this doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. So in this situation, I can check this box, click reviewed, and it will join my other reviewed item as grayed out down in the bottom. And from time to time, you may come across these false positives, and that's not a bad thing. You're proofing this document to make sure that everything is okay. And if you have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb, contract companion being that comb, it's a great way to weed out any potential issues, even if it's false positive. So the next item that I have here is actually a date, and it's telling me here that the correct day of the week for June 1st, 2015 is a Monday, not a Friday. And this is awesome. If, unless you were some sort of savant that could memorize calendars, I don't see how any human could proof this properly. Now, we don't have an autofix associated with this because there's too many variables at play here. Friday could be incorrect, June could be incorrect, the 1st could be incorrect, or the date, 2015, that could be incorrect. So I, as the proofreader, would have to do my diligence and find out exactly when this was actually supposed to be dated. For the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to change this to a Monday, but I want you to keep an eye on the task pane on the right. Now, I'm not telling it to refresh, even though there's a refresh button at the bottom right. But Contract Companion automatically scans the document for changes and updates the task pane accordingly. So you don't have to bounce back and forth between the document and the task pane. I can simply move on. Here we have an out of order number that appears in line. And this is pretty cool because this isn't a numbered item. This isn't a clickable link. This is typed text, and it's Roman numerals. Here we can see I have Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, and it skips to Roman numeral 4. So, either somebody took some content out or somebody simply made a mistake. So I'm going to simply remove the V and put 2 more I's. And now this inline numbered item is in order, and it will remove itself from the task pane. Now you can see here, we've got a bunch of used but not defined terms here. So maybe I want to address those by themselves. Let's back out of all results. And I'm going to go to my defined term issues because I'm seeing a pattern here. So let's take a look at what we've got. Asset purchase agreement, the term is not defined in this document. Okay, so for the sake of this particular instance, I might want to actually define this particular issue, and it would likely need to be defined inline. It would depend on where you are and how the courts want to see this. But this is only used one time, so it would likely need to be defined one way or another. Now, I'm not going to go through and insert definitions for all of these particular issues because that would just be time consuming and wasteful. But we can find, several issues where this is likely not a big deal, right? First Amendment. Does the First Amendment really need to be defined? Probably not. But we need to err on the side of caution when we're proofing documents. So for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to go through this. And let's say that the used but not defined issues have been defined. I'll mark these as reviewed. If I set a definition, these would simply remove themselves because they would no longer be a red exclamation point. They would have a definition, and it would populate then in the all results pane or in the definitions pane simply for to review for accuracy. Here we have a term affiliate that's defined but not used. Now, this probably wouldn't happen all that often if people were generating their own definition section. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel, people take definition sections from all sorts of different documents and pop them into other documents because a lot of the same terms are used. And that was the case in this situation. I actually took this definition section from a different document, popped it into here. So we've got a couple terms that are actually not even used, like affiliate. So I'm going to go ahead and simply remove this. This wouldn't necessarily pose a problem, but you don't need to have any extraneous terms in here complicating anything. And I guess potentially could put you at risk, but I wouldn't see why. Okay, so here's an item that is a little different. And that's because there's 7 instances of it. And this is a really handy tool. This is telling me that the term is not defined in the document, and this is the term closing date, and it's used 7 times. So I can use these little arrow keys, and I can navigate to each one and verify, yeah, we're talking about the right closing date each time here. And as I navigate back to the first one, I can bring back to where I was in my proofing, and I can say, you know what? This is a problem. But what if I'm the secretary or the assistant and I don't really know what the closing date is? I need to bring this to my lawyer's attention. Well, this is where the flag comes in. This is a great time to use a flag. All I need to do is have this item selected, click flag, and you can see the flag is instantly placed right there. Now, let's talk about some of the alternatives to using a flag. What if you work with a lawyer that absolutely hates word add-ins or just refuses to use any word add-ins or doesn't have it installed for whatever reason in his environment? In that scenario, you can utilize a native word comment. So if I check this, just like I did before, And instead of clicking flag, I actually click this little chat looking icon. This will, as I mouse over it, this will say mark the document with comments for selected items. So of course, any items that I would have selected here would be included. But since there's 7 of these, I'm going to go ahead and click this button. And you can see here, as I scroll through, that a Word comment has been generated. And it gives me all the same information that I see in the task pane here. It tells me the author information of actually who ran the check, Brett Bassick, the source of this information, Latera Check, the category, which is used but not defined, and then the description. This term is not defined within the document. So now I can save this document and send it off to my lawyer. Even though it's got the flag in there, he's not using Contract Companion, but he could still see every instance of the term closing date in here, so he can set that definition in the definition section or in line. One other alternative, if your attorney does not want to use comments or flags, or let's say they just like to print out the document and run it against a report. In that scenario, we could check all the items that we want included and click the report button. This is a handy collaboration tool. This is a completely separate document that you can send along with the original document you're proofing, and it gives me the exact same information that I found in the task pane. It gives me the name of the document, the author information, the date down to the second, the issues that I have selected, and everything that is available in the pane. Category, any notes about it, how many instances there are, and where they're found in the document. So you could have a very, very long report that you could go alongside the original, print it out, and proof at your leisure. So those are the 3 ways that Contract Companion allows you to collaborate with other users. So let's move back on to our risk assessment, and let's get rid of these risks really quick. We've got a couple of the risks, and I want them to go away so that I can focus on actually proofing the document and get the rest of it handled. Some other items that Contract Companion will pick up is written numbers with their numerical counterparts. So here we have the written number 1 million that does not match 100,000 in parentheses, and this is a problem. So again, no autofix associated with this, but we need to enter in a comma and a 0, and this will simply go away. We still have closing date on here. I have this marked and flagged for my attorney, and I'll just leave that for now. Now here we have another item. This is a cross-reference. We're moving into a new category we haven't talked about before, but this item is also flagged as well. So somebody has proofed this, and they're trying to bring it to my attention. So what the heck's wrong with this? Well, it's pointing to section 1.2. This is my document. I know that there is no section 1.2 because my first section is all definitions. My numbering does not start until the second section in this document. And lo and behold, it is referring to AHF prepayment amount. So if I navigate back up to this point in the document, we can see we're talking about AHF. And you know, someone just made a typo. This should have been section 2.1, not 1.2. So I have a couple things I could do here. I could go into the document and change that to 2.1, although it wouldn't link it automatically. But Contract Companion would recognize it and allow you to link it with a button press. I'll show you some examples of that in a bit, but I want to talk about what we see here in this task pane. It's telling me this cross-reference refers to content that cannot be located. That's correct because 1.2 does not exist. But we've got this drop-down here. And this drop-down is essentially a tree view of the numbering scheme in this document. So if I know that this is actually supposed to be pointing to section 2.1, I can come down to my second section, select section 2.1, and a couple things happen here. I want you to pay attention to the Word document at this point. Notice that Word went into a split view, and you can modify this size if you'd like. But what this is doing is it's giving you the reference section up at the top half so you don't lose your place. And in the bottom half shows you the cross-reference, the potential cross-reference that we're actually trying to link it to. So I don't know where it went. Oh, there it is. So I want to link this to 2.1. I can see it in the split view. I select 2.1 here, and you can see an assign button appears. This wasn't here before I clicked on this item, and this will appear on any item that I see here. So 2.1 is correct, and what this will do is this will automatically insert a cross-reference into this item. So now you could see within the split view here, section 2.1 is now a clickable link, and if I click on it, it brings me to that item. So as I go down the list here, we can see another example of section 2.2, D, which does not exist, saying the same thing. So if I come down here and I go to my section 2, section 2.2, I can see that there's A, B, and C. There's A, B, and C right there. D does not exist. So either it was removed or it was pointing to the wrong spot. So for sake of demonstration, I'll just link it to C, but maybe I had to put a D in here, right? Knowing the document and proofing the document with a person is still necessary. We could have as much artificial intelligence as we want, but you still need that human interaction to make the right choice. So your jobs are safe for now. Moving down the line, we see that we have an address here. And this is another really cool feature that works similarly to that date feature that we saw. How would a human be able to see this and just know? So what it's telling me here is that the correct city name for the zip code of 60451 is actually New Lenox, not Waukesha. And New Lenox is in Illinois, not Wisconsin. So there's a couple things at play here. Either the zip code's wrong, or the state's wrong, or the town is wrong. In this example, it's the zip code. The zip code should be changed. And if I look up the zip code for Waukesha, Wisconsin, and place it here, this will simply go away. This works for all of North America. It does not work for Europe or UK, but I believe that this would be something that they would like to include in the future. But a very, very cool feature of the software that can really find some sneaky issues within your contracts. So let's say I found the correct zip and I mark this as reviewed and I can move on. Notice that these items didn't go away. And this is because as section references, they're simply marked that we've inserted them with a green checkbox. Also, my flag didn't go away. Maybe it's still here for review. I can, if I'm certain that this is in fact the correct reference, which I've changed it to 2.1, I can simply highlight this one and click flag again, and it will remove that flag. Going down the line to my risk assessment area, I have a proper name, a firm name. And this is pretty cool too, because something like this wouldn't necessarily be picked up unless it was listed somewhere. We have a library of popular firms throughout the country and the world, and we cross-reference against these. Now, not every small firm will be in here. These are majority medium and big law firms that we'll find here, along with some other large corporations that you may see over and over and over again. It will be able to find typos in these types of items. So it's asking me here, did you mean Mader, Cook & Jackson, LLC? Change the D to an E. So I can go ahead and do that. I lost my spot. Let me go ahead and change that D to an E. This will simply go away. So I can click on back. I still have some attention items here, still have 2 flags within this document, but now I'm going to just go back to all results and drill down and see what else I can find. Let's address these yellow exclamation points. These are my reputational items, my informational items. Here we have section references, and this is a little bit different than what we saw with the other section reference here. Before, we had a section reference that was not pointing to anything in the document. It was completely incorrect. Where this one differs and comes up as a yellow exclamation point is that this reference is typed, and actually matches verbatim the section reference that's actually here. So we can recognize that type text calling out section 2.1 does in fact match section 2.1. And if we're happy with these references that we can navigate to using the arrow keys, we could simply click Assign All. We don't have to find a target in the dropdown, although if they were pointing to the wrong place, we could point them to a different reference. Super handy. And if you ever utilize Native Words cross-reference tool, then you know how much faster this is. This is amazing. So I've proofed this. I've gone to each of these and says, yes, I'm happy with these being 2.1. One button click, and now we have a 2.1 section reference. How about this section 2.2? This one's a little unique. This one right here says sections 2.1 and 2.2, but it's typed. So it's implied that it's pointing to section 2.2, but the logic is smart enough that if I click Assign, it doesn't insert the word section. It keeps the and here, and it's still linking to section 2.2. So if I click on this, we're pointing to the right place. Moving on, we have another date. And this one isn't necessarily incorrect. It's simply telling me that the date is a Saturday. It's not a weekday, and not a whole heck of a lot of business goes on the weekend. Is this correct? Should this have been 11? Maybe. A couple other items that we will come across and we will flag, or not flag, but bring to your attention, since we have a flag, and I don't want to use that term incorrectly. We will find definitions that are not capitalized properly. Now, a definition section is recognized by the program via its formatting, including capitalization. Now, we still see this as a definition because a majority of the formatting is correct. We're just missing one of the capitalizations of the word here. So I'm going to go navigate to code, and I will capitalize that C. And now LiteraCheck is going to actually do two things. It's going to fix that, but now it's going to scan again, and now it's going to say, hey, bankruptcy code, it's defined in here, but it's not even used. Okay. I can simply delete it. Now, there's this interesting button that appears here, and it says ignore. Why don't you say, hey, Brett, well, why don't you just click ignore if it's defined and it's not used? Well, if I click ignore, it will ignore bankruptcy code in this document and any other document going on. This is noteworthy. Be careful when utilizing ignore. That's not to say that you can't go into the settings and remove that ignore. However, you don't want to cause extra work for you, and you want to make sure that we're covering all our bases. Give us those false positives just in case. Just a word of caution when using ignore, because you don't want to ignore something later on unintentionally. So what should I really do in this situation? I should delete this. I don't need it. It's extraneous. Not necessary whatsoever. So this will now go away. All right. Couple other typed references. This one's pointing to article. So let's navigate and make sure that article 1 is in fact pointing to the right place. Yep, I'm happy with it. Let's assign it. Here we have an example of missing punctuation. Of course, it's reputational or informational, not necessarily going to get the document thrown out, but you know what? Your clients spend a lot of money on your representation, and your documents should reflect that. So I can simply remove this bracket, and it will go away. Let's go past these next typed references. Let's go ahead and just assign these. Let's say I'm happy with it. We're good to go. Here's some missing punctuation again. We have an opening quotation mark without a closing quotation mark. So let's go ahead and close that up. And then we have an ambiguous term here, but it's actually in the defined term section, the definition section, and it's talking about the term person or persons. Now, this is really ambiguous, right? The word person can be used in several different ways. And as I look here, we can see that it is used in one of those ambiguous ways. It's saying this can be delivered in person. It's not talking about a person. Another one of those false positives, but better safe than sorry. So I'm going to mark this as reviewed. It's okay. So what do we have left? We've got that flagged item because I still don't know what the closing date is, and I want to send this to my attorney, but I'm not done proofing yet, and I want to go down the list. So as I do this, I can mark these names for accuracy. Yes, mark this as reviewed, continue on. Why do I want to review these items? Why do I want to mark these items that I'm going through as reviewed? Well, sometimes it takes some time to proof a document. So let's say I have to break for lunch or go home for the day. In that situation, I can save the document, save it as an unfinished proof, close it, and let's say I went home for the day and I came back and I pulled up my folder and I open up my unfinished proof so I can continue proofing this document. Because everything is saved into this document via hidden bookmarks, when I run my analyze again, all of those bookmarks are going to be reflected. Look, this is in much better shape than it was when we saw it before. And if I come to my all results, we're at the same point, and I can see here at the bottom, I've got all these items that are already reviewed. So I can rest assured that I don't have to go over those items again. I can simply continue on with my proofing, make sure that I'm okay with these terms, and move on. Some other items that we will call out, things like incorrect spacing. And it's tough to see with the human eye. But it's telling me here that there's a space between, an extra space between the and MHC. Someone put 2 spaces, and this happened 5 times. So I can navigate to each of these instances and say, oh yeah, somebody must have copied and pasted that 5 times. Let's just go ahead and fix all. No big deal. You can find terms such as AHF, something that's been used over and over and over again, to find out where it's been used, make sure that it's been used properly in all 29 of these instances, and say, okay, I'm good with this. I can move on. Now, it's stark contrast from reading a document over and over and over, top to bottom, left to right. But as you use the product and use your proofing in the task pane, you're going to see exponential increase in speed. Some other items that we will call out: bracketed text. Remember I mentioned before, if I mark something with bracketed text, we will bring this to your attention. It's asking, is this a placeholder that needs to be filled? We will find highlighted text in the same capacity. I know there's got to be some highlighted text here somewhere. Here. It's saying, Brett, please review. Does this need to be reviewed? Double question marks. If you ever come across double question marks in the document, we will bring it to the attention to say, does this need to be reviewed? I know that there's some in here. There's a lot of items. But we need to get on to citations. But to go on with that particular item, double question marks, bracketed text, underlined text, highlighted text, these will all be brought to the attention of the user via the task pane just on their presence. Just them being there will bring it to your attention. So let's say I've gone through and I've proofed everything. I sent this off to my lawyer. They put in a closing date definition so we know what the date is. And now I need to get rid of all these items I've entered. I need to get rid of these hidden bookmarks. And I don't want to rely on my metadata scrubber to do so. Well, in that situation, in any of the category views, not from the task pane view, any of the category views, you'll see this little menu on the right. This is our options menu, and it allows you to do several things. One, by default, it always has the risks sorted first. If you had this unchecked, the risks would be peppered out throughout this list, and it wouldn't have them at the very top. That way, it would just be sorted by document order. But what we're really here for at this point is we're here to clear flagged and reviewed items. So we've got a flag up at the top here. We've got my reviewed items down here at the bottom. So if I come to this little ellipses and I click clear flagged and reviewed items, what this is essentially doing is removing all of the hidden bookmarks in here placed by Contract Companion. Additionally, we have removed comments from all items, and I want to enter in a comment using native word really quick. If I had a term and I inserted a comment, and that's existing within the document, I come over here and I want to remove my comments from all items. It will remove any Contract Companion inserted comment, and it will leave the native word inserted comments alone. Just something to keep in mind. So once I've gone through and removed all of my metadata, you might still see some attention items if you had marked them as reviewed and you know that they're okay. But you can rest assured that there are no issues to be found within this particular document as far as metadata is concerned. You won't be giving your opposing counsel any leg up. You won't be providing them any insight to what you've done to this document. I'm going to pull up one additional document. We're going to talk about citation issues. Back here in the Litera tab, I'm going to analyze the document just like I did before. And you'll notice that this one has some citation issues. This is because this actually has some citations within it. And let's go ahead and just highlight those authorities so we can very quickly visualize where these are in the document. Okay, I've got a handful, nothing too major. Let's go to citation issues and see what it says. Here it's telling me that all I have is short form citations. There is no long form corresponding to this citation. So I would need to actually go in and actually change that. There's no automatic fix for something like this. We can't simply generate a citation. But if you work in documents such as this, you would know what you would need to do to make sure that you had the long citation or full citation explained properly. This is different state by state versus federally, and you would have to know exactly how this was to be laid out in your example. But what if there was a citation that wasn't being flagged? Well, in that situation, you would simply mark the item, and I'm not sure if I've got one in here that hasn't been flagged. But let's just say if by chance this was paragraphs 1 through 28, I could come here and click mark and then click mark citation. And like I mentioned before, this would simply pull up native word's mark citation dialog box. So if you're familiar with how native word handles citation, this should be familiar to you. The other functionality that we're going to see here is essentially Contract Companion. We can come to all results and continue to go down the list and address any of these items that we found, just like we did in the other document, simply for proofing. Again, there's no table of authorities that can be set from Litigation Companion at this time. That would be handled by Best Authority. There will be a separate session around Best Authority. Let me just talk about some of the settings really quick. And this is going to appear on the wrong screen. Let me drag this up. So here we have the settings dialog, and by and large, all of the categories that we see here are going to work in the same capacity. So for example, common terms, written numbers, or a unit such as $1 or something like that. Or maybe a little more straightforward, names, dates, etc., right? Remember how I said that if you ignore something, it will ignore it from this point forward, regardless of the document. This is where that setting is held and can be removed if you accidentally went and clicked ignore. So say I have my name and somebody clicked my name and clicked ignored. I want my name to be recognized. If that's the case, I can click recognize and it will always pull up Brett Bassick as a recognized name. But somebody here has Bert Bassick, which would be incorrect unless they're talking about my nickname. And in this situation, I might want to ignore this or simply delete it. So I'm going to delete that. We don't need that here. If I wanted to ignore it, I could simply click New, type Bert Basic, and tell it to ignore this. Same thing for company, addresses, negotiables such as numbers, anything like that can be entered in here. Now, for the most part, you won't live in the settings area. And there's one thing I wanted to mention about it that's very important, and that this is a non-distributable item. Any setting that you make is on that client machine only and will only be on that client machine unless you go to a different environment and change it there as well. There is no enterprise-wide distributable for LiteraCheck. Things such as upgrade, import and export are actually legacy. There's nothing you need to worry about this. These will be going away. The display will show the task pane here in either a tile view or a tree view. So if I close this out, this will switch to a tree. In my opinion, not as visually appealing, but to each their own. In addition to that setting, we have the active drafting colors. Remember when I toggled on the active drafting and it superimposed those highlights underneath some of the different terms? This is where you can specify what color you would like for those specific terms. Purple for definitions, yellow for inconsistent capitalization, orange for defined but not used, and red for used but not defined. These are just the defaults, but you can go ahead and change these. Not pivotal, but it may be helpful in certain environments. Now, again, this is only going to be on the one client machine, one environment. You cannot distribute this to anybody else. The sticky settings are enabled by default, and this allows for things such as sort risks first, things like that. One last setting I want to talk about that is different from all the other categories here is definition formats. And I know that we talked about the defined terms a little bit and how we pick things up, such as the formatting, right? And the capitalization, things like that. So if I click on definition formats, we have another settings dialog that appears, and it's a little bit different than what we saw before. And these are our out-of-the-box definition formats. So if I click on this top one, it's indicating that double quotes in bold with standard capitalization, no brackets, and the following terms of shall mean will be indicated as a defined term. And we've got a bunch of these. Go down the list, and you can see there's all sorts of different formats. You know, this one has parentheses. 9 times out of 10, probably even higher than that, probably 99% of the time, out-of-the-box configuration for defined terms will pick up what you're looking for. But occasionally, you might get that one-off document that's got some really goofy formatting, and you might need to make a new definition format or modify an existing one to fit your needs. So for sake of demonstration, let's make a really obnoxious one. Let's click New, and let's tell it that we want single quotes with bold, italic, and underline, and double chevrons and lowercase because it looks terrible. Let's enter in here shall mean. That's fine. And let's tell it that it also needs preceding text this term. So if I click add, you'll see it adds there. If I click this add, and I can add a bunch of different preceding or following text. Just for an example. And now, if we have a combination of these formats along with the preceding and following text, we will then identify this as a defined term. This is the one place that I feel that if there was a distributable, it would be handy. However, because of the fact that a majority of the definitions or the defined terms are actually picked up out of the box, it's kind of a moot point. But as administrators, you should be aware of this particular setting and the fact that it cannot be distributed, and you likely need to train your users to modify these defined terms on their own. So that wraps up the functionality of Contract Companion, Litigation Companion, and LiteraCheck, along with all of the settings. Does anybody have any questions? I'll open up the floor.
No, I don't think I have any questions. Um,
All
I was
right.
going
Well,
to ask, there's another training right after this. Is it the same thing?
it's going to be very, very similar, minus some of the settings, some of the settings that we've gone over.
Because I think we're the only ones who are signed up for that, and so we may not need to have that training since it's
Okay. Yeah.
same.
You know, with this particular product, um, the lines between trainer, admin, and user are really blurred because it's very straightforward. There's no distributable, there's no database that needs to be handled. It really is a fire and forget type add-in. Very, very handy, but it's pretty hands-off. So at least you'll be able to answer these questions to your users should they come up. But for the most part, I think that you'll be in good shape.
The best authority piece,
Mhm.
when do you see that being integrated in?
You know, I can't really speak to when that's going to be completed. I know that it's in the works. I haven't seen any pre-releases with it combined, but I know that it's on the roadmap.
Okay, so um, we're going to be licensed for best authority now, which we
Hmm.
don't currently have today. So that would be a separate product, separate install.
That's
So
correct.
they would run Contract Companion, and then they would run best authority to get their table of authorities.
Yes, that's correct. And generally, the TOA gets inserted at the very end, right? For the most
Right.
part. So this would be your first step. You can check using highlight authorities to make sure everything's okay with regard to citations. And once you're sure that everything's all right there, then you can go into the best authority piece and run that workflow. And I know that upon installation now, if you were to install best authority, it would sit itself a best authority button right next to Litera check. And while the functionality doesn't live on the Litera tab, when you click that button, it will bring you to the Best Authority tab, and then you can continue your workflow. We will have a separate training session for Best Authority.